I remember the first time I really questioned if all the work I was doing to heal my emotional pain was actually even working. I remember I had been working with a therapist for at least a year and a half, and I felt like we were making progress. And I went on this venture with two other people to start a business. And in the midst of that, we had meetings that we would do. And I remember in that, first of all, the interactions that we were having didn't feel healthy, but I didn't acknowledge that. What ended up happening was I lashed out and had a really bad argument with one of the partners in that venture. And I remember afterwards feeling really bad and talking to my therapist after that, realizing that I had been dealing with trauma through all of the work I had been doing. I hadn't recognized yet that I had actually had some childhood trauma that really had triggered my response in that situation. But what I remember so deeply is how for days I had went into this dip, this emotional dip, and it took some days to come from out of that. And it felt really dark. It felt really bad. And I really questioned if all this work I had done was in vain. So I want to talk about 4 ways to know if you are healing from your emotional pain. My name is Crystal Turner, and I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner who's going holistic because I know to be whole is to be healed. And I would like for you to press the like button, hit the subscribe button so that you'll get more, you'll be notified and you'll be able to be connected with each video that I put out each week. So periodically, you're going to see me looking at some notes because it's going to keep me from rambling as I am talking to you and sharing this information with you. So I really do want to first start by talking about the healing process and my personal definition of healing. Now, I look at healing as getting strengthened or repairing yourself from the inside out. So from deep within on the way out. A lot of times we're doing the very opposite in our society and our culture. We're healing from the outside in, and that's backwards in my mind because what that sounds like is superficial healing. And our superficial healing can look like putting on a smile when we're really hurting deep inside. It could be being accomplished in our career or starting our businesses, but really letting our pain be the driving factor and not really ever addressing our pain. It can look like dressing in the finest of things and having financial gains and thinking that because we have these things that we must be better than we were in the past. And that's not accurate. You know, when we are dealing with emotional pain that's not healed, even those things can impact us. For example, if you gain a lot of financial success and you feel good because you did that and you feel that that is the indicator that you've healed, if those things are taken away, do you plummet right back down to who you were before you got all of those things? And so are you back at square one? So that is how I define healing, is really repairing ourselves from deep within on the way out. So when we do that, our scar isn't tender. When we heal from the outside in, it's tender, it bleeds easy if it's touched. When we heal from the inside out, it's closed up. It's a scar there. We can see that we've had these things we've gone through, we know it, but it's not in a way that it can be opened or be damaged so easily anymore. And when we talk about that, keeping that in mind, also when I talked about my question to myself of if I was even healing, if the things and the work I had done had been in vain, the other thing I want you to keep in mind as we go through these tips is that healing is a journey. I know you've heard that before. Healing is definitely a journey. It's not a race. And it's a journey of hills and valleys, I would say, or peaks and valleys. We go up, we go down. And when we're in those valleys, oftentimes we can gain endurance and strength to get to that next peak. We bring a lot of information with us in those dips. So looking at the whole picture, yes, we will have times where we can have difficult moments again, but how we come through those and what we gain from them and how we can look back at situations is all part of really seeing how our healing has progressed. And then also, in the midst of that and knowing that, I want to encourage you to be compassionate with yourself, to be gentle with yourself in the process of going on this journey that is so courageous to heal and grow through the pain that really could have kept you captive for probably most of your life. So these 4 tips, let's talk about them. So 4 tips to know, or 4 signs to know that you're healing from emotional pain. And the first one I want to talk about is the way that you express yourself emotionally. I remember this woman, I was in nursing school in the beginning of the nursing program, and everyone was in there. There were so many of us starting out this program, knowing everyone's nervous. Everyone's heard that, this program is difficult, it's hard, it's challenging. Most people who were in the program were adults in their adult life. They may have had children. They may have had a career before, had a family. And I remember this one particular woman, she was Arabic. And I remember she was an older woman. To me, I got the sense that she had raised a family, or, she was at least in her 50s. At that time, I was in my 20s. So she was an older woman. And I remember, how sensitive she was emotionally. And the way I saw this is because when we would have a lecture with the professor, she might ask a question, and the professor maybe they disregarded her question, or maybe they were a little harsh in the way that they responded. I don't want to say it's terribly harsh, but they may have challenged her in some type of way in what she asked, or there can be some professors who will just respond as if your question, I don't know, maybe wasn't the best question. But what I remember is that when those types of things would happen, she would start crying publicly. What I saw was that it was very hard for her to keep her emotions together in those moments. And so it would become very frequent that, she would ask a question, or if something seemed a little challenging, she would start crying, or she would leave the room. Eventually, she wasn't in the program anymore, but I really thought about her when I thought about when we're not healed from our pain, how our emotions can be so on display, and it can be hard for us to manage and control them, and that's not with any type of judgment, but it's a fact. I understand it. When we are healing from emotional hardships, we may notice that our endurance in the way we respond to challenges may come with a bit more strength. We may not be as emotionally fragile. We may not cry as easily. Crying isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? There are times where crying isn't a way of expression, but when it's in this space where it's like we are breaking down, or, it's not what we would have desired to do, to be emotionally sensitive in these ways where it's hard to gain your own composure. And it doesn't only have to look like crying. Again, it can also be lashing out with anger. When I was dealing with that situation I mentioned with myself, I lashed out in anger. So these ways of not having challenges in controlling yourself emotionally, all of them, like being able to see that there's a more balance and more self-control and how that comes about. And mainly it's because you're not triggered. It's not necessarily that you're sitting somewhere saying, okay, let me control this. It's like it doesn't trigger you to have those responses as easily anymore. You may have a thicker skin if someone says something to you, and be able to brush it off, or be able to, put it back to them, because it's not something that you're taking personally as an attack toward you. So that first sign that I've noticed in my own life, and that I would say to you, is that your ability to handle your emotional regulation, or your emotional regulation, is strengthened. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be the relationships that you're building. You may see those changing to healthier relationships. One of the things I know when many people have dealt with emotional pain or a traumatic past is that you can have a low identity or perception of yourself. And one of the ways that you can really try to rectify this is in relationships. Sometimes it could be relationships that make you value who you are. Your relationships can say to you who you are. So sometimes just having relationships can mean that you're significant. And with that, sometimes you can take on just any relationships just to have people around you because you don't want to be by yourself, because being by yourself means that you're not valued, right? So having relationships around that could also remind you of relationships you had in the past that were toxic, or relationships that looked like the relationships of the toxic people in your life in your past, or an abuser in your past. Sometimes we can really attract that when we haven't healed it. It really goes back to metaphysically, we attract what we really hold within ourselves. And so when we are healing, we won't be as afraid to let go of unhealthy relationships with this fear of being alone. We may realize that time alone is needed. Time alone may not be as dreaded, because to be alone when you like yourself doesn't feel the same as being alone when you see yourself as insignificant. And so you may be willing to let go of relationships that that haven't been healthy. Those relationships where you go there to see the person, when you leave, you feel worse than you did when you got there, or worse than you did before they came. Those types of relationships, you're not afraid to let those go. And you can be more open to new relationships. And that's another part of when we're dealing with emotional pain. We can also have a guard up that keeps us from being able to establish relationships or go deep into relationships. We can start relationships, and then at the sign of any type of discomfort, we can run from them or shut people out. It can be the easier thing to do. It can feel like the safer thing to do. But when you're healing and growing, you may be more open to being around more people, especially when you find people who you can start to trust your own judgment, that these relationships actually feel good. You know what I mean? That they look supportive, that you're able to give support and you receive support. And so you may have more desire to be around people, as when you're dealing with emotional pain, you can be more closed off as a way of protecting yourself. When you're healing, you may see that you don't have to have this idea of self-protection all the time. You can have this desire for connection more when you've healed. So you may find yourself having these shifts in relationships, having more healthy relationships, and letting go of the relationships that weren't right for you in the first place. Those relationships that carried a theme that you seem to always attract this type of person, you may find that that's not happening anymore, which is a great feeling. And then there is finding purpose and passion in life. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that sometimes, or if I didn't mention it, I'm mentioning it now. Sometimes when we are using our pain or having these superficial ideas of healing, we can use our work as this idea that we've healed. Because we're accomplished in our work, we can think that in and of itself means that we're healing. But sometimes when we're not healing, our work is just a distraction from really dealing with ourselves, or sitting with ourselves, or who we see ourselves as if we're not doing things. Like we always have to be doing something to prove to ourselves that we're valuable and that we have a place in the world, that we should be here. But when we're truly healing, when it comes to these things, our passions and our desires, we go after them. So the whole purpose of work and things of that nature is shifted to something that is meaningful, that it wakens you up, it enlivens your spirit, it is coming from your spirit. It's really wanting to give to people because you want to see people do well and or you've seen yourself come through some things and you want to now share that with other people because you yourself have been the witness to how that way of doing things has really changed your life or helped your life. So, and then even having passion and desire is a thing that we see when we're healing. Whereas when we're dealing with emotional pain, which can come with things like depression, we may not even have the motivation for anything. We just are here and may not even want to be here, but it's not, there's no motivation. But when we are really healing, we are passionate. We find our passion in it. We wake up with this, we feel good about that thing. It's what wakes us up. It's what makes us smile when we wake up. You know what I mean? It's that thing that has so much meaning to us. And, it negates fear and all those things that can keep us from, working or going for something that we would really have a desire to do. So healing can open our world up more to recognize, what do I want to do when I'm here, or what are my desires? And now I want to go after my desires. And then 4 would be letting go of the past. A lot of times when we are dealing with emotional pain, the past is like, it haunts you. It's you think of the past and you think of it from a place of shame, feeling shame from it, feeling regret, feeling bad about it, wishing it never happened, asking why it happened. And it can be hard to let go of the past. So many things can remind you of it. So it can really feel like daunting, and exhausting, that it's like you can never let go of the pain. Like you want to let it go, but it's so hard to let it go. And when you're healing, yes, that pain may always be there. It may always be a sensitivity for you. But when you're healing, that sensitivity can turn into being sensitive to recognize other people who've experienced what you've experienced, in a sense that you could support them if you choose to. You know what I mean? It can be where you'll always know it because you've experienced it. But when you look to the past, if you look at the past, it's more so with a sense of, insight to your past and how your past impacted you. So it's more about learning from the past. It's using the past as seeing where you were then and seeing where you are now. Like, wow, there's been a lot of growth in who I was at that point in time to where I am now. It's not just, it's not that shame and guilt. Those are like 2 major robbers of our peace, is shame and guilt. They don't do anything for us but haunt us. It doesn't help you grow. But when you're healing, you can look back and no longer feel shame and regret and, guilt. It can be now insightful. This is probably why I felt that way, but I don't feel that anymore. I see where I am now, and I'm free from those types of emotions as it relates to that experience. I've seen its purpose. I've seen where it had me. I've seen what I've done to be able to come to where I am now with that. And there are levels to things too. So you could still be coming through it, but also you could be at a point where you're not where you were when you think back to that point to where you are now. There could still be some way to go. Like I said, we are on a journey, and it's a journey. It takes time. One of the prerequisites I think there should be, that we should know when it comes to healing, is patience. Patience with yourself, patience with the process, and knowing that it is a process. So in a process, understanding that it's moving forward. So seeing where you are in the process from when it started, before anything had transpired, to where you are now. If you see some shifts and some changes, give yourself credit for it, love on yourself, cheer for yourself in those moments, and know that you will move forward and see even more growth. So those are the 4 things that I wanted to mention. Again, remember that this is not a race, it is a journey, and really our entire life is a life of growth. I don't want to say healing, because when we say healing in this moment, it can feel like, oh, it can sound tiring. Like, you mean I'm going to always have to heal? Like that sounds exhausting. But really what healing is growth. And if we can understand that we're always growing and there's growth in that, that means we're getting stronger. So we don't have to feel tired and exhausted from it, because through growth, we gain strength. And we realize how strong we are coming through that situation, how much strength we've gained. We've gained it possibly physically, yes, because when we are dealing with especially trauma and stress, it breaks our physical body down. So when we're healing, we may see changes in ourselves physically, in our mental strength, like, you know, the way that we think changes, and the resilient types of phrases we give ourselves is like, oh, wow, that's helpful. You know, that was actually helpful to me, you know, and that emotional and that spiritual strength that we gain in this process of growth. You know, we become different people, you know, we are transforming in the midst of healing. We're becoming someone else, you know, and it's someone who gains wisdom through those experiences, wisdom for yourself to be able to, you know, say, you know, none of this had to have necessarily been, it's not in vain, because I've done the work. And those very difficult things because I've done this work, I've become a much stronger person. And you will have wisdom that you can share with other people. And you don't have to be someone who's going on the mountaintop to share wisdom. That might not be your desire, but even the people around you, your children, you know, them seeing you go through this process, you may think you'll be surprised how transformative it is for them within, and just their whole idea of healing and hardship when they see you doing this thing for yourself first, because it needs to be authentic, that is going to speak louder than anything you can actually speak. This healing thing is not, it heals you, but it's just so amazing how it is a catalyst for healing in other people. People being able to see you've done something, and it's a witness to them that, wow, I'll never forget how I saw that person transform. And I know that encourages me to be able to do that in my own life. You know, those are the things that we can give to other people just by doing things for ourselves first, from a place of love. When we love ourselves and do things for ourselves from a place of love, we actually extend love to those around us, because we show them that they can do it, and we become better people too. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Please let me know in the comments section how you felt about this. Do you feel like this encourages you to want to continue healing or start healing? And what point really stuck out for you? Also, I'm going to leave in the comment section. I'm going to leave in the comment section, I think it is. I'll leave below a link to a 21-day meditation series that I have. It is a way that you can develop a practice of healing, to be in your heart space, to be in your mental space, to be quiet, and to be able to just be, you know, and to be able to gain the insights that the meditations are taking you through, which is really about creating the life that you want within yourself, within your relationships, and then within the world. That is what I'm sharing with you today. Please like this video, share this video with someone who you think could really benefit, and I will be back to talk with you next week. Have a beautiful week. Take care.